All right. So we are recording, um, and this is my discussion session for the physical science lab. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Basically, since it's the first week of class, and since really it's the first day of class that I'm doing this on, I really just want to go through the syllabus briefly with you all, and that is what I'm going to do for this discussion session. Um, at the moment, nobody is other than me is here. This is, I guess, technically an asynchronous course anyway, so there's no penalty for having missed this. You are welcome to watch these afterwards, hence why I'm trying to record them. My apologies if ever the recording fails or something like that. Sometimes just we have technical difficulty, and if nobody's here and I'm having technical difficulty, then for that week there's not going to be any special recording. I will edit these after the fact, largely to cut out the first 3 or 5 minutes or whatever when I've or 2 minutes when I've logged in and I'm just waiting for people to file in or virtually file in. Okay. And so then you don't have to sit there and just watch me stare at the screen for 3 minutes for no reason. Okay, so this is the syllabus for the online lab. I'm Dr. Sanders. I'm an associate professor of physics. I am based at the Troy University main campus. Um, and I have a PhD in physics from UT Austin. I used to study high energy laser plasma interactions. I've since kind of switched over to STEM education a bit because that's what we have a budget for here at Troy. And this is the physical science laboratory course. So in some sense, this is just the lab course you take with physical science lecture. The majority of you are also in my physical science lecture. This course does require a bit of time commitment, in part because you've got to gather all the lab materials for each week's lab. Uh, it costs you a lot less money to go buy these things individually than it would if I were to put together a lab kit. I think at one point I tallied up how much it would cost to buy every single item that I list for this lab, all this stuff. And then I went and looked at standard lab kits that you could buy, which would have most of this stuff in it. And then maybe we'd have a different set of labs to accommodate. Well, first of all, most of these standard lab kits are not built for physical science, they're for general physics. And second of all, the lab kits are usually like two or $300, whereas this stuff, if you are thrifty, you can get all this for well under 100, and you may actually have quite a bit of this stuff just lying around. But the only thing that's not well under 100 is your car, and for that, the majority of people who take this class have a car or a truck or an SUV or a motorcycle or something like that, and the handful who don't can always ask to borrow a friend or a parent or that kind of thing. You're not having to drive it or anything. You just are making a quick measurement of the tire. So I do expect that you procure your lab materials in a timely fashion. They are basically all listed here in the syllabus. So, there's no reason for you to be week number 7 and say, well, I can't find this thing for the lab this week. You really should have procured it earlier in the semester, or at least figured out where to procure it from. We have we have one lab per week. You basically do the lab, you take the quiz, and that's it. I've made them due on Tuesdays, so it's offset from the lectures due dates a little bit. There are 8 total labs. We don't have any formal prerequisites for the course. You should be taking the physical science lectures the same time as this. This is a university course, so I kind of expect that you've made it to the university and therefore that you have at least done a little bit of math in high school. Um, that's just the way of things. We don't have any required textbook for the lab. There's a required textbook for the lecture, and you might use it as a reference, but everything for the lab is in the form of handouts that you can find over here in the course modules. This is, again, the list of material that I think you're going to need to have to do all of the labs. So, find it, procure it. Hopefully some of this is lying around. Obtain what you don't have. It's an asynchronous class. There's no formal attendance policy other than just getting the labs done. There's an introduce yourself forum that I can use to take attendance in. And that's about all. There's no physical meetings, but you could show up to these if you'd like. But again, these can be asynchronous. I understand that not everybody's schedule is the same, and this time doesn't work in everybody's schedule. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Here's how your grades are decided. Every lab, there's a quiz except for one. There's one that's sort of a formal lab report. No quiz for that one. But for all the other labs, you have a quiz. They're all weighted equally. The quizzes are 80% of your grade. You have an introduce yourself forum. This is 4% of your grade. This is basically like my census assignment. There is a final exam where 15%. There is also a formal lab report assignment. This was sort of forced on us by the university and really forced on us and only us. They didn't do this to biology. They just did it to physics and chemistry. They said, oh, well, we expect formal lab reports from all your labs. They didn't tell me how much I had to make it worth. So it's worth 1 point out of 100. So you can decide if 1 point is worth your effort or not. You need an 85 to make an A. I will typically get everything graded within 1 to 2 days. In fact, it's mostly automatically graded. The only exceptions are your forum post and your formal lab report. Formal lab report, I will grade over the last 2 weeks of the course. It's basically due at the end of week 6 or beginning of week 7. So I'll start grading them sometime in there. And then they'll just be graded by the end of the semester. I have to follow a certain rubric, which I didn't actually get to make up. It is this long rubric here that was provided to me. So you can get some sense of how long the formal lab report that's worth 1% of your grade is going to be. And again, you can always decide to, whether you want to get that last 1% of your grade. If you do, then that's fine. If you don't, then, well, it's not like you're going to fail the class or even miss out on an A in the class for 1%. Late policy quizzes. If you turn them in after the due date, but before I've started looking at grades, you lose 20%. If you turn it in after I've looked at grades, but before I've put up solutions, you lose 25%. And then if it's turned in after the solutions are released, then you get a much harsher penalty. You can't turn it in more than a week late. After that, it's just worth 0. Here's a list of the 8 planned experiments. This is your formal lab report experiment. Even if you don't plan to do the lab report, I would still do the experiment. It's a good experiment. It's not worth much of your grade. Quizzes are all due on Tuesday nights. This is to offset from the lecture. So that is a rundown of the basic requirements of this course. And I think that's all I really have for this discussion session. I don't see anybody here. So I think I'm going to end the session on that. Anybody who watches this asynchronously, well, thank you for watching. Hopefully this helps you understand the syllabus.